porcelain teacup in Jihuan's hand was worth more than most men's lives. He lifted it to his lips, the amber liquid inside still steaming, and took a slow, deliberate sip. Around the long mahogany table, 6 men knelt so low their foreheads kissed the imported Italian marble floor. Their breathing was ragged, terrified. They should be. Jihuan set the cup down with a soft clink that echoed like a gunshot in the suffocating silence of his private office. He knew what was in that tea: arsenic, the same poison they'd been slipping into his food for the past 3 days, hoping to make him weak enough to eliminate. The same poison meant to kill the most dangerous mafia boss's soul before he could complete the one act his organization could never forgive, choosing love over the code. But Jihuan wasn't dying. Not today. Not ever. He leaned back in his leather chair, his white dress shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal the edge of the black dragon tattoo that coiled around his throat like a promise of violence. His fingers, also decorated with traditional ink that disappeared beneath his silver Patek Philippe watch, drummed once against the armrest. Behind him, standing with the poise of a queen surveying her conquered kingdom, was Larissa. She wore a tailored black power suit that transformed her from the woman in the green nightgown they'd underestimated into the first lady of an empire built on blood and silence. Her dark skin seemed to glow against the sharp lines of her white shirt, and her expression, calm, regal, utterly fearless, made the men on the floor tremble harder. They'd tried to kill her just hours ago. A sniper's bullet through the library window while she painted. They'd failed. Now they would pay. 3 days ago, Jihuan's voice cut through the room like a blade, I burned a contract, a marriage contract that meant nothing except survival and strategy. He stood, rolling his shoulders, letting his full height and the full scope of his tattoos become visible. The dragon seemed to move across his chest with each breath. That contract kept my wife in the East Wing and me in the West. It kept her as a piece on the board and me as the player. It kept us safe. He walked toward the kneeling men, each step measured, predatory. But I broke my own rule. I brought her into my world. I moved her things into my room. I made her my equal. His lips curved into something too dangerous to be called a smile. And you, my own men, you saw that as weakness. One of the men whimpered. Jihuan's foot stopped inches from his bowed head. The old guard taught you that love is a liability, that a boss who protects his wife instead of his empire is a boss who deserves to fall. He crouched down, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt louder than a shout. So you poisoned my tea. You sent a sniper to my library. You contacted Park's loyalists to finish what the Southern operation started. Behind him, Larissa moved, not away from danger, but closer. She stood at Jihuan's right shoulder, and for the first time, the kneeling men dared to glance up. What they saw in her eyes made them look away again, faster. Here's the new rule, Jihuan continued, standing again, his hand reaching back to briefly touch Larissa's wrist, a gesture of unity that sent shockwaves through the room. Anyone who doesn't bow to my wife doesn't stand at all. Anyone who threatens her doesn't breathe. Anyone who questions her place in this organization. He paused, letting the weight of unspoken violence fill the space. Well, you're about to find out. He snapped his fingers. The office doors opened, and more of his men entered, the loyal ones, the ones who'd already made their choice. They carried a tray. On it, 6 more teacups, steaming with the same amber liquid Jihuan had just consumed. Drink, Jihuan commanded, his voice like iron. The same poison you gave me. Let's see if you have the stomach for the death you tried to serve. The mansion had felt lighter after the contract burned. But the shadows were deeper now. And in those shadows, the last of the traitors were about to learn that Jihuan's greatest weakness had become his most terrifying strength. The hunt wasn't over. It was just beginning. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to Hidden Love Stories, where your favorite love stories come alive with all the passion, drama, and emotion you crave. Before we dive into today's pulse-pounding tale of loyalty, betrayal, and vengeance, I want to take a moment to wish each and every one of you a day filled with courage and grace. May this season bring you the strength to stand by the ones you love, no matter the cost. Now, settle in, because what Ji Huan is about to do to protect Larissa will redefine what it means to rule with both power and love. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end for this one. This is where broken rules become new empires, and where a mafia boss proves that his deadliest weapon isn't fear, it's the woman standing behind him. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. The first night in the unified wing, Ji Huan couldn't sleep. It wasn't the unfamiliarity. He'd slept in war zones, in safe houses with one eye open, in cars parked in alleys where death waited around every corner. It was the weight of what he'd done. The mahogany doors that once separated east from west now stood open, useless. Larissa's belongings, her books, her paintings, the small wooden box from Lagos that held her mother's jewelry, now shared space with his guns, his ledgers, his secrets. She lay beside him, her breathing steady, one hand tucked under the pillow. The moonlight filtering through the curtains caught the gold of her wedding band, the real one he'd given her after they burned the contract. Not the hollow symbol of a business transaction, but something that meant mine, something that meant forever. Ji Huan traced the dragon tattoo on his forearm, following the scales up to where they disappeared beneath his sleeve. His father had worn the same mark, his grandfather before him. The ink was a promise. The organization came first, always. The family, the blood family of soldiers and syndicate, eclipsed everything else. Wives were strategic, children were heirs. Love was the fastest way to a bullet in the back. But 3 days ago, he'd set that promise on fire and watched it burn. The house felt different now, lighter in some ways, the oppressive silence of separate wings replaced by the sound of Larissa's laughter echoing through halls that had forgotten joy, but heavier in others. The staff moved through the corridors with eyes that lingered too long, whispers that stopped too quickly when he appeared. He'd built this empire on fear and respect, but respect was a fickle thing when the rules changed overnight. Beside him, Larissa stirred, turning toward him in her sleep. Her hand found his chest, settling over the dragon's head inked above his heart. Even unconscious, she reached for him. It was that instinct, that trust, that made him want to burn the whole world down for her. He slipped out of bed without waking her, pulling on black slacks and leaving his shirt unbuttoned. The mansion stretched out before him, 3 floors of luxury built on blood money and brutal efficiency. He walked the halls like a ghost, listening to the sounds of his own home. In the kitchen, the night staff prepared breakfast for the morning. In the security room, monitors flickered with feeds from every camera on the property. In the servants' quarters, someone was crying softly, a sound that stopped the moment Ji Huan's footsteps echoed too close. Fear. They feared him. Good. But fear wasn't loyalty. And in the past 3 days, he'd learned the difference. He found Kim, his head of security, in the west parlor, reviewing reports on a tablet. The older man stood immediately, bowing deep. "Boss, I didn't expect—" "Who's unhappy?" Ji Huan cut him off, his voice low. Kim's eyes flickered. "Sir? Don't insult me with ignorance." Ji Huan moved to the window, looking out at the gardens where snow had begun to fall. The transition, the unified wing, my wife's new position. Who's talking? A pause. Too long. Kim. The kitchen staff, some of the security rotation, a few of the drivers. Kim's voice was steady, but his hands gripped the tablet tighter. "It's adjustment, boss. Change is opportunity." Ji Huan turned, and something in his expression made Kim step back. "Opportunity for those who want to seize power when they think I'm distracted. Who transferred in during the past 6 months?" Kim scrolled through his tablet. 3 kitchen staff, 1 driver, 2 security guards for the East Wing. "The East Wing," Ji Huan repeated softly. "Larissa's wing." "Yes, sir." "Hired by whom?" Another pause. "Park, sir, before his exile." The name landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading outward. Park, who'd led the southern operation. Park, who'd tried to poison him to take control of the organization. Park, who'd been exiled instead of executed because Ji Huan had been merciful. Mercy. His father would have laughed. "Pull their files, full background checks. I want to know where they were before they came here, who they talked to, what they eat for breakfast." Ji Huan buttoned one button on his shirt, then thought better of it and left it open. Let them see the dragon. Let them remember who he was. And double the security on Larissa's detail. She doesn't leave the house without 4 men minimum. Sir, she's been asking to visit the gardens tomorrow. She wants to pick flowers for... Then she picks flowers with 4 guards and a sniper on the roof. Kim bowed. Understood. Ji-hwan left him there, moving through the mansion with purpose now. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the Seoul skyline in shades of gold and pink. Beautiful, deceptive, like everything else in this world. He found Larissa awake when he returned to their room, sitting at the vanity in one of his shirts, brushing her hair. She met his eyes in the mirror, and something in her expression told him she'd known he was gone, known and not followed, giving him space to be who he needed to be. Couldn't sleep? She asked. Old habits. She set down the brush, turning to face him. You're planning something. Not a question. A statement. She'd learned to read him in the silences, in the things he didn't say. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I'm protecting what's mine. I can protect myself, Ji-hwan. I know. He crossed to her, cupping her face in hands that had killed more men than he could count. But you shouldn't have to, not in my own house. Her eyes searched his. What did you find? Ghosts. Park's ghosts, still haunting the halls. He kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her. Cocoa butter and jasmine, so different from the gunpowder and smoke that usually filled his lungs. But ghosts can be exorcised. And if they're not ghosts, if they're real threats, then I'll make them wish they were dead already. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. Instead, she stood, wrapping her arms around his waist, her cheek against the exposed skin of his chest where the dragon's tail curved around his ribs. We do this together. You promised me no more separate wings. That means no more separate battles. He wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in the safest room in the mansion and handle this the way he'd handled every other threat, with blood and brutality and the absolute certainty that he operated alone. But he'd burned that contract, burned that distance. She was his partner now, in every sense that mattered. Together, he agreed, the word foreign on his tongue but right in his chest. The morning came with the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of dishes clattering in the kitchen. Larissa had insisted on overseeing breakfast preparation, not cooking it herself, but supervising the staff, learning their routines, making her presence known. Ji-hwan watched from the doorway as she moved through the kitchen with quiet authority, tasting soup, adjusting seasoning, asking questions about dietary restrictions for the household. The kitchen staff bowed when she passed, some with genuine respect, others with something that looked like resentment, barely concealed. Mrs. Kim, Larissa said to the head cook, an older woman who'd been with the family for 20 years. This is delicious. What's your secret? The woman's face softened. Just patience, ma'am. Good food takes time. I'm learning that. Larissa smiled, and Ji-hwan saw the moment Mrs. Kim's loyalty shifted, saw the older woman look at his wife not as an interloper, but as the lady of the house. One down, dozens to go. But then he noticed one of the newer kitchen staff, a young man who'd transferred in 5 months ago, watching Larissa with eyes that held nothing but calculation. The man's hand rested near a pot of tea, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm against the counter. Ji-hwan moved. He was across the kitchen in 3 strides, his hand clamping down on the young man's wrist before the pot could be moved. What's in the tea? The kitchen went silent. Every head turned. Sir? The young man's voice cracked. It's just tea. For your breakfast. What is in the tea? Larissa stepped closer, her expression unreadable. Ji-hwan? He didn't take his eyes off the young man, didn't release his wrist, just applied steady pressure until the bone beneath his fingers began to creak. Empty your pockets. Boss, I don't... Now. The young man's free hand shook as he reached into his apron. He pulled out his phone, a lighter, a crumpled receipt, and a small vial of clear liquid. The kitchen erupted in gasps. Mrs. Kim backed away, her hand over her mouth. Larissa went very, very still. Ji-hwan plucked the vial from the man's palm, holding it up to the light. What is this? Silence. Jihuan's grip tightened. The young man yelped, Arsenic! It's arsenic! Please, boss, they said it was just to make you sick. Not to kill you, just sick enough that... That what? Jihuan's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire kitchen. That the organization would see me as weak? That someone else could step in? That my wife would be vulnerable? The man was crying now, tears streaming down his face. Park promised. If we just made you choose between her and the organization, you'd send her away. He said you'd never really choose her. That it was all strategy. That you'd protect the empire over everything. Jihuan looked at Larissa. She stood with her arms crossed, her expression carved from stone, but he could see the slight tremor in her jaw, the flash of hurt in her eyes before she locked it away. Park had been wrong. About everything. Kim, Jihuan called, knowing his head of security was already on the way. The man appeared in seconds, 4 guards behind him. Take him to the holding room. Find out who else is involved. I want names, locations, every detail of their little coup. The young man screamed as the guards dragged him away. Please, boss, please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean... The door slammed shut, cutting off his pleas. Jihuan turned to the remaining kitchen staff. They stood frozen, eyes wide, barely breathing. Anyone else want to confess? Silence. Anyone else receiving instructions from Park? From Song? From Lim? More silence. Good. Because the next person I find plotting against this household, against my wife, doesn't get a trial. They don't get mercy. They get me. He let that sink in, watching fear ripple through the room like a living thing. Then Larissa spoke, her voice calm and clear. Mrs. Kim, please prepare a new pot of tea. Green tea, no arsenic. A pause, and impossibly she smiled, sharp and dangerous. And make enough for the entire household. I want everyone to have breakfast together this morning. One unified family. The message was clear. Drink what we drink, eat what we eat, or be revealed as the enemy. Mrs. Kim bowed low. Yes, ma'am, right away. Jihuan took Larissa's hand, leading her out of the kitchen and into the privacy of the hallway. Once they were alone, she turned to him, her composure cracking just slightly. How many more? I don't know yet, but we'll find them. They really thought you'd choose the organization over me. They didn't know me at all. He pulled her close, pressing his lips to her temple. The organization was built by my father, my grandfather. But you're the first thing I've ever chosen for myself. The first thing that's truly mine. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of his unbuttoned shirt, following the lines of ink. They're going to keep coming, aren't they? Park's loyalists, the old guard, everyone who thinks love is weakness. Yes. Then we need to be smarter. She looked up at him, and he saw the moment the fear transformed into strategy. If they think you're sick from the poison, they'll accelerate their plans. They'll reveal themselves. Jihuan stared at her. You want me to pretend to be dying? I want you to give them enough rope to hang themselves. She stepped back, her mind already working through the possibilities. You said Park promised they'd make you choose. So let's make them think their poison worked. Let's make them think you're weak, distracted, desperate. And when they come out of the shadows to strike, we burn them all. She nodded, and in that moment, standing in the hallway of his mansion with her hair still slightly mussed from sleep and determination blazing in her eyes, Jihuan fell in love with her all over again. Together? He asked. Together, she confirmed. By midday, the rumors had already started. The boss was ill. The poison had worked. He'd retreated to his private study, too weak to manage operations. Larissa made sure of it, whispering carefully chosen words to the right staff members, letting concern color her voice just enough to sound genuine. Jihuan played his part. He moved slower through the halls, let his hand shake slightly when he reached for his coffee, dismissed meetings with trusted lieutenants, claiming exhaustion. By evening, even his most loyal men were exchanging worried glances. In the security room, Kim monitored communications. Every phone call from the mansion was logged, every text message traced. And slowly, carefully, the conspiracy revealed itself. The two new security guards had been texting an unknown number, Park's burner phone, they discovered. The driver had been making trips to a warehouse on the outskirts of Seoul, meeting with exiled members of the Southern operation. And the remaining kitchen staff member, a woman who'd seemed so harmless, had been passing information about Larissa's schedule to an encrypted email account. "They're planning something for tomorrow," Kim reported, spreading surveillance photos across Ji-hwan's desk. "The garden, when Mrs. Kim goes to pick flowers." Ji-hwan studied the photos, the angles, the sightlines, the perfect place for a sniper to hide in the trees beyond the garden wall. "How many are involved?" "6 that we've confirmed. Possibly more." 6. The same number currently kneeling in his office in the vision that haunted him. The same number that would learn what happened when you threatened what belonged to Ji-hwan Kim. "Let them come," Ji-hwan said softly, his fingers drumming against the desk. The same nervous rhythm he'd seen in the young man's hands this morning. Fear was contagious, but so was rage. "Tomorrow, Larissa picks her flowers, and tomorrow, we pick our traitors." That night, Ji-hwan held Larissa tighter than usual. She didn't ask why, didn't need to. She simply pressed closer, her heartbeat steady against his chest, her faith in him absolute and terrifying. "Promise me something," she whispered into the darkness. "Anything. When this is over, when we've rooted out all of Park's poison, promise me we build something new. Not just a cleaned version of the old empire, but something that's ours. Something that doesn't require us to sacrifice love for power." Ji-hwan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers threading through her hair. His father had built this organization on brutality, his grandfather on fear. But maybe he could build something different. Something that proved love and power weren't mutually exclusive. "I promise," he said, and meant it with every tattooed inch of his skin. Outside, snow continued to fall on Seoul. Inside, a mafia boss and his wife planned a reckoning. And in the shadows, 6 traitors made their final preparations, not knowing they were already dead. The garden would bloom red tomorrow. The morning arrived with deceptive tranquility. Frost clung to the garden's iron gates, and the white chrysanthemums Larissa had been cultivating stood like small monuments against the dark soil. Ji-hwan watched from the bedroom window as she dressed, choosing a cream cashmere sweater and dark slacks. Elegant, unbothered, as if she were simply a woman who wanted to cut flowers for her home. She caught his reflection in the mirror. "How do I look?" "Like bait." "Perfect." She fastened a delicate gold necklace at her throat, a gift from her mother, one of the few things she'd brought from Lagos. Her fingers were steady. "And you?" Ji-hwan glanced down at himself. He'd chosen lighter colors deliberately. A white shirt, tailored but loose enough to make him seem diminished. He'd even skipped shaving, letting stubble shadow his jaw. The carefully constructed image of a man weakened by poison, desperate enough to let his guard down. Like prey. Also perfect. She turned to face him, and for just a moment the mask slipped. "Ji-hwan, I know." He crossed to her, taking her face in his hands. 4 guards, 2 snipers on the roof, Kim in the security room with every camera focused on that garden, and me, watching from the study window with a rifle and perfect sightlines. "That's not what I was going to say." "Then what?" She placed her palm over his heart, feeling the steady rhythm beneath ink and muscle. "Whatever happens today, whatever we discover, we don't become them. We don't let this poison us the way it poisoned Park." He wanted to promise her that. Wanted to swear that vengeance wouldn't transform him into the monster his father had been. But honesty had become sacred between them, and honesty demanded a different answer. "I can't promise I won't become a monster when someone tries to kill you, Larissa. I can only promise that whatever monster I become, it will always protect you first." She searched his eyes, then nodded slowly. "Then I'll be the one who reminds you who you are after." "Deal." They went downstairs together, maintaining the performance. Ji-hwan leaned slightly on the banister. Larissa hovered close, playing the concerned wife. The staff they passed bowed low, but Ji-hwan caught the flicker of anticipation in certain eyes. Excitement, barely concealed. They thought today was the day their boss fell. In the kitchen, Mrs. Kim had prepared a light breakfast. Rice porridge, grilled fish, banchan arranged with artistic precision. The older woman's hands shook slightly as she served them, her eyes darting to Ji-hwan's face, searching for signs of illness. "Mrs. Kim," Larissa said gently, "the chrysanthemums should be ready today. I'd like to cut some for the dining room." The woman's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Oh, ma'am, they're beautiful. You've been taking such good care of them. Hopefully they'll brighten the house." Larissa smiled, but her hand found Ji-hwan's under the table, squeezing once. Beauty in dark times. After breakfast, Ji-hwan retreated to his study as planned, making a show of exhaustion. He dismissed his secretary, locked the door, and moved to the window. From here, he had a perfect view of the garden. Kim had positioned cameras in every corner, hidden among the foliage and decorative stonework. Two of his most trusted snipers lay flat on the mansion's roof, invisible against the gray sky. And in the garden below, Larissa emerged with her 4 guards, a wicker basket over her arm. Ji-hwan's finger rested against the trigger of his rifle, his breath steady, waiting. She moved through the garden with practiced ease, examining each chrysanthemum, selecting only the most perfect blooms. The guards maintained position around her, professional, alert. For 10 minutes, nothing happened, just a woman picking flowers while her husband slowly died upstairs. Then Ji-hwan saw it, a reflection of sunlight off metal in the trees beyond the east wall. A scope. The sniper had taken position exactly where Kim's intelligence suggested. "Kim!" Ji-hwan spoke into his earpiece. "East wall. Trees. You see him?" "Confirmed, boss. Our snipers have the shot." "Hold." Ji-hwan tracked the scope's movement, watching as it followed Larissa, waiting for the perfect moment. But something was wrong. The angle was off. Too high. The sniper wasn't aiming for Larissa. He was aiming for the guards. "They're going to take out her security," Ji-hwan realized. "Make her vulnerable. Kim, tell me you have men positioned for extraction." "Ready on your command." Larissa knelt beside a particularly large chrysanthemum, her back to the east wall. Perfect position. The sniper's finger would be tightening on the trigger right about. The shot cracked across the garden. One of Larissa's guards dropped, blood blooming across his shoulder. Non-lethal, intentional. The remaining 3 guards immediately formed a barrier around Larissa, but they were exposed now, and Ji-hwan could see movement inside the mansion. The 2 corrupted security personnel rushing toward the garden entrance, weapons drawn. It wasn't just an assassination. It was an extraction. They were going to take her. "Now," Ji-hwan commanded. His rooftop snipers fired simultaneously. The shooter in the trees fell without a sound. The 2 corrupted guards barely made it 3 steps into the garden before Kim's men emerged from the shadows, tackling them to the ground. And Larissa, brilliant, fearless Larissa, didn't scream. She simply stood, dropped the basket of flowers, and walked calmly back toward the mansion as chaos erupted around her. Ji-hwan was already moving, rifle abandoned, taking the stairs 3 at a time. He met her in the entrance hall, and the relief that flooded through him was almost painful. She was untouched, safe, his. "The driver," she said immediately, no tremor in her voice. "He wasn't with the others. He must be—" The sound of an engine roaring to life cut her off. Through the windows, Ji-hwan saw one of his own cars, a black sedan, speeding toward the main gate. The driver was fleeing. "Seal the mansion," Ji-hwan ordered into his earpiece. "Nobody in or out. Kim, send a team after that car, but I want him alive." "Already on it, boss." Within the hour, they had them all. The driver, caught 2 miles from the mansion by a roadblock. The 3 captured guards from the garden. The woman from the kitchen staff who'd been passing information. And one more. A name that had emerged during Kim's interrogation that made Ji-hwan's blood freeze. Yoon, the youngest underboss. The man Ji-hwan had personally chosen to replace Park after the Southern operation fell. 28 years old, brilliant, ambitious. The son of one of his father's most trusted lieutenants. The traitor had been sitting at Ji-hwan's table for 3 months, smiling and bowing and planning his death. "Bring him to my office," Ji-hwan said, his voice empty of emotion. "Bring all of them." The study that had once been his father's, and his grandfather's before that, had witnessed countless acts of violence. The mahogany desk was original, nearly a century old, stained with the sweat and blood of men who'd knelt before it, begging for mercy. The bookshelves held ledgers documenting every sin the organization had committed in 3 generations. And the floor, that imported Italian marble, had been chosen specifically because blood wiped clean from its surface without leaving a trace. Ji-hwan stood before the desk, waiting. He'd changed clothes, white shirt unbuttoned to mid-chest, revealing the full scope of his tattoos, black slacks, black belt, the silver watch that had been his father's. He looked every inch the monster his reputation promised. Behind him, Larissa entered quietly. She'd changed, too, into the sharp black power suit that transformed her into something regal and untouchable. She took her position at his right shoulder without a word, and Ji-hwan felt her presence like armor. The door opened. Kim's men brought them in one by one. 6 traitors. 6 lives that had already ended, even though their hearts still beat. They were forced to their knees in a precise line, heads bowed so low their foreheads touched the marble. Last came Yoon. The young underboss walked in with his head up, defiant even in capture. But when he saw Ji-hwan, really saw him, standing there with death in his eyes and a dragon coiled around his throat, the defiance cracked. "Boss, I can explain—" "Kneel!" Yoon's knees hit the floor hard enough to echo. Ji-hwan waited until the room fell silent, until even breathing seemed too loud. Then he walked the line slowly, studying each bowed head, each trembling shoulder. 6, he said softly. The same number who stood with Park during the Southern operation. The same number who thought loyalty was negotiable. The same number who decided that my love for my wife made me weak. He stopped in front of Yoon. "Stand up." The young man rose on shaking legs. "Look at her," Ji-hwan commanded. Yoon's eyes flickered to Larissa. She stared back, expression carved from ice. "Tell her why," Ji-hwan said. "Tell my wife why you tried to kill her." I never wanted her dead," Yoon's voice cracked. "Just gone. Back to Nigeria, safe, out of the way." "Out of the way of what?" "The organization," the words burst out desperately. "Boss, you have to understand. Your father, your grandfather, they built this empire on one rule. Nothing comes before the syndicate. Nothing. Not love, not family, not humanity." Larissa spoke for the first time, her voice cutting. "Not decency? Not the possibility that a man could be powerful and capable of love?" Yoon flinched. "It's not about what you are, Mrs. Kim. It's about what he becomes when he chooses you. Distracted, vulnerable, human." "And being human is such a terrible crime?" She took a step forward, and impossibly, Yoon stepped back. "Tell me, when you planned to take me in that garden, to extract me, use me as leverage, did you think about what that made you? Or were you so busy worrying about my husband's humanity that you forgot your own?" Ji-hwan had never loved her more. "Here's what you didn't understand," Ji-hwan said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper. "My father built an empire on fear, but fear has a limit. Fear makes men obey until they think they can win. Fear makes men bow until they think you're weak enough to challenge." He began unbuttoning his cuffs, rolling up his sleeves to reveal more ink. "But love makes monsters. Love makes men burn the world down for one person. Love makes me so much more dangerous than my father ever was, because now I have something worth protecting at any cost." He snapped his fingers. Kim stepped forward with a tray, 6 teacups, steaming. The same amber liquid that had been laced with arsenic for 3 days. "You wanted to poison me?" Ji-hwan picked up 1 cup, holding it out to Yoon. "You wanted to make me choose between my organization and my wife? So here's your choice. Drink this, and maybe, you live long enough to be exiled like Park. Or refuse, and I'll make your death last 3 days. The same 3 days you spent poisoning my food." Yoon stared at the cup, his face white. "Boss, please." "Drink." I can't if that's really arsenic. It's not. Larissa's voice cut through the room. It's just tea. Green tea, no poison. But you don't know that for certain, do you? You don't know if we're merciful or monstrous? You don't know if this is a test or an execution, and that uncertainty, that terror, that's what you put me through every day for 3 months. Jihuan set the cup on the floor in front of Yoon. Then he moved down the line, placing a cup before each kneeling traitor. All of you, you have 1 minute to decide, drink and live, refuse and die. But understand this, whichever choice you make, you never threaten what's mine again. The study fell silent, except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. 60 seconds. 59. 58. The woman from the kitchen grabbed her cup first, draining it in desperate gulps. One of the guards followed, then another. Their faces showed relief, then confusion, as they realized they weren't dying. Just tea. Just a psychological execution designed to break them. But 3 remained frozen. The driver, 1 guard, and Yoon. The clock ticked down. 30 seconds, 20, 10. Time's up, Jihuan said. The 3 who'd drunk the tea were pulled to their feet, dragged toward the door. They'd live, but they'd be exiled, sent to the furthest edges of the organization's reach, where they could never touch Seoul, never touch Larissa, never threaten his empire again. The 3 who'd refused stared at their cups, then up at Jihuan. Please, the driver whispered. I have a family. So do I. Jihuan's voice was iron. And you tried to take her from me. He nodded to Kim. The executions would be quick, professional. A mercy they didn't deserve but that Larissa's presence demanded. He wouldn't make her watch prolonged suffering, even of enemies. But Yoon, he kept kneeling. You're different, Jihuan said, crouching down to meet the young man's eyes. You were my choice. My successor, maybe. I saw potential in you. Intelligence, ambition, all the things my father valued. He paused. But you lacked one critical thing. What? Yoon's voice was broken. You didn't understand that the strongest empires aren't built on fear alone. They're built on loyalty. Real loyalty. The kind that doesn't waver when the boss falls in love. The kind that doesn't calculate odds and betrayals. Jihuan stood. My father's empire was held together by terror. Mine will be held together by something stronger. The knowledge that I protect what's mine with absolute brutal certainty. And now, everyone who works for me will know, you touch my wife, you don't just die. You become a lesson. He let that settle, watching Yoon's face crumple. Kim, Jihuan said, send word to every cell, every operation, every corner of this organization. Anyone who served under Park, Song, or Lim has 48 hours to confess their involvement in any plot against this household. Confess and face exile. Stay silent and face me. Yes, boss. Jihuan turned to Larissa. She'd remained perfectly still throughout, watching everything with those sharp eyes. Now she stepped forward, looking down at Yoon with something like pity. You called me a distraction, she said softly. A weakness. But you were wrong. I'm not his weakness, I'm his certainty. I'm the reason he knows exactly what he's fighting for. And that makes him the most dangerous man you'll ever meet. She looked at Jihuan, and he saw the question in her eyes. What happens to this one? Jihuan could kill him, should kill him, by every rule his father had taught. Traitors didn't deserve mercy. Traitors deserved examples. But Larissa's hand found his, her fingers threading through his, and he remembered her words from last night. We don't become them. Exile, Jihuan decided. But not just exile. I want him sent to the Nigerian operation. I want him to work under Larissa's uncle, protecting her family in Lagos. And every day for the rest of his miserable life, I want him to remember that the woman he tried to destroy is the only reason he's still breathing. Yoon collapsed forward, forehead hitting marble, sobs racking his frame. Thank you, boss. Thank you. Get him out of my sight. Kim's men hauled Yoon up and away. The office emptied until only Jihuan and Larissa remained, standing in the space where his father's ghost had once ruled with absolute cruelty. Larissa turned to him. Is it over? The immediate threat? Yes. Park's poison has been purged. Jihuan pulled her close, breathing in jasmine and cocoa butter and home. But there will be others. There will always be others who see love as weakness instead of strength. Then we'll deal with them too. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Together, like we promised. Together, he agreed. That night they stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of their unified bedroom, looking out over Seoul. The city stretched before them, glittering and vast, built on the bones of men who'd thought power and love couldn't coexist. I need to tell you something, Jihuan said quietly. Larissa waited. The illness I felt, the poisoning. It wasn't just the arsenic. He struggled for words, unused to this kind of honesty. It was 3 years of silence, 3 years of keeping you at arm's length. 3 years of denying what I felt because I thought distance kept you safe. My body was manifesting what my mind already knew. Living without you was its own kind of death. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, and now? Now I feel alive for the first time since my father died. He turned to face her fully. You asked me to promise we'd build something new, something that's ours. So here's my promise. The organization's first law, the one that supersedes everything my father and grandfather established, is this: no one touches what's mine. Not my wife, not my family, not the future we're building. And anyone who tries will learn that love doesn't make me weak. It makes me unstoppable. Larissa reached up, tracing the dragon on his throat. Then let's build an empire that's never seen before. One where power and love aren't enemies. Where being human doesn't disqualify you from being dangerous. A new empire, Jihuan murmured. Our empire. He kissed her then, deep and claiming, tasting the future in her mouth. Behind them, the city glittered with 1,000 promises and threats. But inside this room, inside this unified wing that had once been divided, 2 people stood together against the world. The next morning, Jihuan called a meeting of his entire operation. Every underboss, every lieutenant, every soldier who carried his name. They filled the mansion's grand hall, hundreds of men in dark suits, waiting to hear what new rule would govern their lives. Jihuan stood at the front with Larissa beside him, no longer in the shadows, no longer hidden in a separate wing. She wore that black power suit like armor, and the men who'd once whispered about her now stood in respectful silence. 3 days ago, Jihuan began, his voice carrying through the hall, I burned a contract that governed my marriage. Today, I'm burning another contract, the one that says a leader must choose between power and love. My father built this organization on fear and absolute loyalty to the syndicate. I'm building something different, something stronger. He paused, letting them absorb it. The new first law of this organization is simple. My wife is untouchable, not because she's weak and needs protection, but because she represents what we're building. A future where we're more than criminals hiding in shadows, where we're men who can love and still be feared, where family means something more than strategic alliance. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, some uncertain. Anyone who has a problem with this new direction has 48 hours to request reassignment. No questions, no consequences. But if you stay, if you choose to be part of this new empire, you bow to her the same way you bow to me. You protect what's ours with the same ferocity you've always protected what's mine, because we are no longer separate. We are unified. He looked at Larissa and she nodded, silent permission for what came next. And to prove that this unity makes us stronger, not weaker, I'm making an announcement. My wife will be taking over operations in Lagos. She'll be expanding our reach into West Africa, building alliances her way through trust and mutual benefit, not just fear. And anyone who thinks that makes us soft will learn very quickly that mercy and weakness are not the same thing. The hall erupted in whispers. Larissa stepped forward and the crowd fell silent. I know many of you didn't want me here, she said, her voice clear and strong. I know you saw me as a distraction, a liability, a target. And you were right about one thing. I am different. I don't come from this world. I don't speak the language of violence as my first tongue. But I speak the language of survival. I speak the language of building something from nothing. And I promise you this. I will protect this organization and everyone in it with the same ferocity my husband does, because you are my family now too. She paused, her gaze sweeping across hundreds of faces. So this is your choice. Stand with us and build something unprecedented, or step aside and watch from the outside as we change everything. But know that if you stay, if you choose this unified empire, you will never have to choose between loyalty and love again. You can be both monster and man, both feared and human, both powerful and whole. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from the back of the hall, one soldier stepped forward and bowed. Deep, respectful, absolute. Another followed, then 10, then 50, until the entire hall was bowing, not in fear, but in choice, in loyalty, in the understanding that something fundamental had shifted in their world. Ji Huan watched his empire kneel before his wife, and he knew his father was rolling in his grave. Good. That night, after the meeting, after the confessions from Park's remaining loyalists, after the restructuring and reassignments, and the careful work of building something new from the ashes of the old, Ji Huan and Larissa returned to their room. She collapsed onto the bed, exhausted but triumphant. We did it. You did it, he corrected, stretching out beside her. I just stood there looking threatening. You gave them a reason to believe. We make a good team. The best team. He pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat synchronize with his. So, West Africa, Lagos operations. Think you can handle it? She laughed. I grew up navigating Lagos politics. Your mafia is practically straightforward by comparison. Straightforward, he repeated, amused. Is that what we're calling attempted assassination now? Just another Tuesday in our new empire. They lay in comfortable silence, watching shadows play across the ceiling. Outside, Seoul hummed with life, some of it theirs, some of it beyond their control, all of it full of possibility and danger. Ji Huan, Larissa's voice was soft. Thank you. For what? For choosing me, for burning the contract, for building something new instead of just maintaining what was. She turned to face him, her eyes serious. For being brave enough to love me in a world that punishes love. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Thank you for being worth burning the world down for. And there, in the unified wing of a mansion that had once been divided, a mafia boss and his wife built their empire, one kiss, one promise, one act of defiant love at a time. The dragon on Ji Huan's chest seemed to breathe with him, ink and skin and beating heart all synchronized. His father's legacy was fear, his grandfather's legacy was brutality. But his legacy, theirs, would be something the criminal world had never seen. Power tempered by love, strength magnified by unity, an empire that proved you could be both monster and man without sacrificing either. And anyone who tried to tear it apart would learn what Ji Huan had known since the moment he first saw Larissa. Some things are worth protecting with absolute, brutal, unwavering certainty. His empire, his wife, their future, untouchable,